go ahead and we'll get ourselves started again. We're both kind of still trying. But before we get started kind of with the main part of the lesson, let me tell you about some help resources that are available that actually Laddie pointed to a little bit in a memo today, or an announcement today, but some stuff that may help you, because all this stuff goes by, and I'm trying to, we're trying to get a lot of stuff out there, and some of the finer points and nuance sometimes slips by, and we actually have a relatively complete set of tutorials that kind of walk you through some of this stuff in little 4 to 5 minute chunks. So let me point you to where some of those are, so that for any of these things, like especially on the curtain walls or something like that, if some little detail about what we're doing is missing and you want to just kind of watch 4 minutes of really how to get that a little more finely, you'll know where to find those. And where those are is you can get them through our coursework website. Let's see if I can find coursework. Okay, if I can shrink this up again so I can sort of see things. Oh, well, thank you very much. Of course, it helps if you enter your correct ID. Second time? Yep. Okay. If you go to the coursework site, you can get to it this way. You can also get to it just from the web. There's a site called Bimtopia, which is a kind of blogging site where I post a lot of stuff. But in addition to sort of the random posting stuff, there's actually a lot of good stuff out there. Although, it doesn't seem to come up in coursework, so I'll just take you the other way. Okay. It's just Bimtopia. Are we coming? Are we coming? Stanford. Yes, no, maybe? There's
no triple W.
That should be good. Don't know. That's where. I'll try another place where you can find these things. Okay, that part's working. Not sure why my website's down. I'll show you the other place. Okay, bimcurriculum.honest.com. That's another place we can get to these things. And where on the BIM curriculum these things live is under the Architecture tab. You'll actually find in here a couple of different really cool things. There's a Bim Modeling Basics unit, and underneath that, there are some lessons set aside where things like the basic building envelope stuff that we've been doing in terms of doors and windows. There's these little tutorials that tell you about adding doors and windows, creating roofs, modeling wall structures and changing them, or curtain systems is one that's pretty good too. So creating curtain walls, adjusting the grid lines, changing the panel types. Like that's what we were just looking at a second ago. So if you choose that, there's a little Silverlight video out there that you can watch. And what is it? It's like 4 minutes of the best of creating these things. And these were actually created by a bunch of students like you. We did it over a summer as a project a couple of years ago. We're selecting those individual curtain wall panels. Let's see what Billy has to say here.
To select the individual curtain wall panel, move the cursor near the desired panel and press the Tab key until it's highlighted. The grid lines have divided the wall into individual
blah, blah,
elements.
blah. See if I can come further in there. Changing the materials properties. Ultimately, making a red panel. It's like all those sort of things. So, in any case, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and Laddie pointed you to them. Or they're not working on my website, I'm sort of concerned about, but they're going to be okay. So, in the BIM workshop, you're going to find some of those BIM modeling basics. And this actually tracks a lot of the stuff we're doing in the class, so because they really were developed out of the class. Another one that we're going to get to a little bit later, we're going to hope to get to sort of the scheduling and the quantities. There's actually a great tutorial on Unit 2 all about creating schedules. So if we don't get to it quite today, you go to schedules and quantities, and you'll find things about creating schedules, adding information to the schedules. That's where you'd add the formulas and things like that. So again, there's always more help to kind of get you through things that we sort of miss in class. We don't quite get to it in class. So just want to let you know that stuff's available. Okay, Let's switch back over to the live stuff, though, and kind of talk about this notion of placing doors and curtain wall systems. Because it's kind of a funny concept. We got used to the notion of panels and being able to change the materials of panels. A door in a curtain wall is actually just another type of panel. Okay? So you can have fixed panels of glass or fixed panels of material. That's kind of okay. But if you want to, you can also have swinging panels. So things that are hinged to the side, we'll call a door. If it was hinged at the top or the bottom, it might be more of a window. And it's really just considered another panel. It's confusing because you think of it as a door. In a floor plan, it looks like a door. In a lot of ways, it looks like a door, but it's really placed like a panel. Okay, so just file that one away. Again, it won't seem relevant now, but later on, when you're trying to put that door in there, you'll be trying to put it in as a door, and it won't do it, and you wonder why. And that's what's going on, is that it's just kind of fighting with you. And I'll be the first to admit, it's kind of counterintuitive in the way it works. So what happens is you're over here in the product, you go through and choose the door tool. You put a door in. It works just fine in that side. You come over to your curtain wall, you try to put a door in, and you get this, cannot be placed symbol. You get the no sign, stuff like that. And the reason is, again, it just doesn't, it's like a door, but it's not really a door. So what it is a panel. So let's think about how you're going to have to approach this. As a panel, the way you might think about approaching it is we're going to choose a panel and change its type. So we have glaze, we have green, we have solid, we have all those sorts of things. That's pretty good. If we want to go through and have a door panel, okay, the door panel isn't actually loaded into your project right now, but you can load it in. There actually is a door panel type that you can kind of bring in. And where you do that is, we can say insert, load a family. And here's what's confusing. It lives under the doors, okay, which is exactly where it shouldn't live, because I just told you everything about why it looks like a door, but it really isn't a door. But it's filed away under the doors in the library, and you'll find there's a double glass panel, a single glass panel, storefront panel, which has a little bit of aluminum framing. So you can choose any one of those, or actually choose all three of them. But what I'm going to do is open. And all that's really going to do is bring them into the project. So then they'll be available as panel types for us to choose. Okay, so again, where I got that, just so you know, is I'm going to load family. I'm going to say doors, which sounds very counterintuitive. I'm going to choose those three. Say open. It's going to complain now. Actually, it didn't complain. I'm surprised. Okay, when I have those loaded in, what I can do is go through and choose a panel. That one's still locked. I have to unlock it or unpin it. Pull down under the type selector, and you'll see that I actually have these different panel types. Double glass, single glass, double storefront, which will have the frame. Let's make it a single glass door. And what it's going to do is just swap out that fixed glass panel for a hinging panel at that point. Okay, so the confusing part is, again, you downloaded it, you inserted it, you came out of the doors thing, you sort of want at this point, and this is, again, sort of a really common thing, and I only kind of tell you because I see people do it every year very consistently. You loaded it as a door, you go to the door tool, and you don't find it. Okay, so you go back and you reload it, and you go back to the door tool and look for it, and you can't find it. And about the third time, it finally hits you, oh, maybe it's not really a door, even though it sounds like a door. And so where it's showing up is just under the panel. So the only way to see it is to actually choose one of the panels, unlock it, and change it over. Now, it's only sort of semi-smart about what's going on. I could put a storefront one in there. That'll put one with a little frame in it. It will go ahead and make a double panel or a single panel out of whatever you pointed to. Okay? So it doesn't really care if that panel is 2 feet wide by 10 feet tall, or if it's 16 feet wide by 5 feet tall. It will try to make a double panel out of it. It's just sort of find that place. So the work of actually creating a panel which is the right size to convert into a door comes back to you. Okay, so you have to go through and just break up the panels to actually create a panel that will make sense of the door size. Okay, so how do you do that? That isn't too awfully bad. If, for example, let me choose one of these. These are about 8 feet tall. Actually, I'll go through and I'll even do it to that funny wall down there. Okay. For example, if I change this panel down here in the lower right-hand corner to a door, it'll only be about 4 feet tall or something like that. So what I would have to do is just sort of change the shape of that. Maybe take out that grid and that mullion and then change the whole thing. So let me do that. That might be a good example. So if I have some gridding and it doesn't quite look right, well, let me do one of the other ones. These won't be so bad over those. They're about 8 feet tall. Choose one of those panels. Okay, unpin it, make it a single door. That's actually pretty reasonable as a door. Okay. As you're doing that, if you're a purist, you might actually sort of recognize that a door probably won't have a mullion at the bottom because you'll trip on it when you come through. So if you want to, you can choose that mullion, unpin it, and just delete it. Okay, and that's a little bit better. But if you don't have something that's conveniently sized, what you may need to do is, well, here I am. I'd love this to be a door, but it doesn't quite look like one just yet. So what I'm going to do is choose the mullion, get rid of it. Yeah, per your question a little while ago, I could just choose the grid and get rid of it, and then the mullion would also disappear. So either way, I'll grab that mullion, grid's still there, no worries. I'll grab the grid, and then I have to say this add or remove segments to actually allow myself to pop it out. And once I've constructed something, I might have to add, I might have to subtract, whatever it is. I have to get some box that looks like it's going to be the door. And then I can do my tabbing, and then make that into, that looks like a pretty good double door. Still a little bit tall. If that's feeling a little bit too tall for you, and that probably is, I bet that's like 10 feet tall or something like that. Not to worry. We can go through and kind of make it a little smaller. You know, giant 10-foot pieces of glass aren't so great when the wind's blowing. It's a little bit hard to maneuver sometime. So if I need to break that out, maybe I'll just add another grid to it somewhere around in here. Okay. Now I got a door going over here. Looks like up there I just have a single solid panel. I can add some mullions to that, whatever it is. But yeah, just go ahead and adjust the panel sizes and then swap it out. Okay, let's pause there for a second. That's the most complicated thing we need to do with a curtain wall, is something like that. So how does this whole notion of putting a door in a curtain wall feel? Okay? Neat. Okay, so that's probably the weirdest thing we're going to do today. We're going to move into sort of more familiar territory now in terms of floors and roofs.
I have a question.
Yes?
What if you want to add a window to a curtain?
Ah, that's a very good question too. Like a moving operable window.
Yeah.
It turns out there's actually a type for that. Okay, and I'll see if it's in the standard library. If not, I'm going to point you to, I have another library that's full of other good parts. Let's see if we have under Windows. Let's see if it's in there. Casement, combination, curtain wall awning. It is right there. Okay, so if I load that in, okay, again, it's not going to show up under Windows where you think it's going to show up. It's a type of panel, even though it's sort of filed away in a bad spot. So I can choose that panel, and I'm now in here. There's curtain wall awning. So that's now a big operable window. And we don't have this, again, that's a more common detail in other parts of the world. In the US, we don't do that as much, but it's actually a very good detail to have operable tilt-in, swingable windows. Yeah, other parts, especially Europe, has very sophisticated windows. We should learn a lot from the windows that are kind of commonly available there, because we don't specify them nearly as much. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at floors and roofs. They're very similar, and roofs especially is the one that kind of gives people a lot of trouble. So we'll go through floors pretty quickly and then talk about sort of what's special about roofs. Because floors, you actually sort of have what you need to know about floors, because we sort of did it as we were going through and kind of doing the the wall openings. But to make it simple, I'm just going to give myself a very simple little piece right here. I'll say wall, architectural. I won't make it a curtain wall right now. I'm just going to make some sort of relatively straightforward structure. Well, so much for being straightforward. Come there. Okay, and I'll turn up the coarseness or the fineness of what we can see so I can actually see this wall has layers to it. So creating a floor is actually pretty simple. It's that same boundary thing. You pretty much choose a boundary, you choose a type, the floor is going to show up in there. So when I choose the floor tool, and I look at some draw tools that are available, I have all these drawing tools. I can really draw any arbitrary boundary. I tend to like to select walls and let it find the boundary for me. The big thing you have to watch out for here, and 9 times out of 10, this makes sense to choose. Extend into the wall core. What that's going to do is for this wall, which has these different layers, as opposed to sort of extending out to the outer surface, it's going to pull it back to the core. So again, what that looks like is if the wall's coming down, I'll find a color I like yet. They're all about equally bad. Okay, I have a wall that's made up of multiple layers. I have a floor that's going to be coming in here. And the question is really, how far should that floor go? Should it go all the way to the outer surface, or should it hold off at the core layer? And 9 times out of 10, what we actually do is we hold it at the core layer. Because what we want to do is have the floor supported by studs, have studs on it, everything line up at the outer edge there, and then have the outer layer, the material that's either the stucco or the siding, just go right over the edge of the floor. You tend not to want to see the structure of the floor poking out. Okay? So extending into the wall core usually helps us with that. Let me choose a floor type here. I'll do the wood floor, but it can be a generic floor if you want. I'll zoom on in here a little bit. I'm going to pick the walls. And as you're picking walls, note that as I go through and pick that wall, it's sensitive to really which side of the wall you pick. If I pick sort of the inside surface of the wall, it'll go to the core, but it'll sort of put it on the inside face of the core. So the core, the structural core is here. The inside face is back over here where the sheetrock is located. Okay. If I get it wrong, I can just hit the flip. It'll go over and it'll go to the outside face. Now, as opposed to over here, it's going to the outside face of the wall. So, one or the other. But if you want to be able to control that just as you're working, as you first start specifying them, no worries. What you do is you choose the draw tool, pick that wall, and if I hover over the middle of the wall or towards the outside face, it'll put it on the outside of the core. So, kind of like Windows, it just sort of, it makes a difference whether you're clicking on the inside or the outside. You're giving it a clue about which side you're trying to select. Okay, so I've done that one. I can select the other walls and kind of get them all. The important thing is that when I get all done, I need that complete boundary. Okay, so that actually worked out pretty well. Let me undo all that and show you some ways that you might need to kind of like help it out a little bit. One thing you can do that actually works out pretty well is if you have walls that are fairly uniform in their type, you can actually get really quick in this, in that there's that thing about tabbing to select a chain of things. I can actually just go say, choose that wall tool, and if I hover over one of the walls, but before I select that wall, I tab, it'll actually select all the walls. So I can actually get the whole boundary just with one click. So kind of a nice little shortcut in terms of saving some things. Again, what did I do? I just hovered over. It's got that one wall's highlighted. I tab to get them all highlighted and then grab them all at once. And that's pretty good. I'll finish that up and things will be in pretty good shape. I got a floor there. Now, one of the hard things about floors, just so you know, is they're actually kind of hard to select again because as you look at almost any view, there's almost always a wall on top of them, right in the same place. I can usually get them in 3D views. There's the floor. It's kind of poking out down there. I can get to it that way. It's kind of hard to get in the floor plan view, but if it has a pattern to it, you can get it that way. But floor is a little hard to select. If I want to change that floor, I can edit its boundary. It'll give me the boundary lines back again. I can make some changes to it. So what can you actually do to it? You can do anything that we did sort of with that wall profile. I can cut a hole in it. I can put a notch hanging out, whatever it is that I want to do. So for example, if I have an atrium or want to cut a hole for a stairway or an elevator or a dumbwaiter or whatever it is going through, I can choose some other drawing tool. And just create a hole. Again, I could also do that with, like a circular hole. And what happens, same rule, outer boundary creates positive geometry, the inner boundary cuts away and creates a hole in this. So generally works out pretty well. About the only thing you have to worry about when you're doing this is it's that ever popular kind of tab or notch thing where if we want to do something like that, what I have to do is just clean it up so that it doesn't intersect, but it actually forms that continuous boundary. And again, the best way to do that's probably to break it. And then I'll use the trim tool. Just trim this one to that, trim that one to that. I sort of have the notch. I still have that little left over. I just have to delete it. Okay, so now I got that notch in there. So in general, people get floors pretty easily. And think about, you can have multiple floors. Like here I have a wooden floor that I want to have, just right at the floor level. This is level 1. In your assignment, I should comment, the ground is actually hanging out around here at like -6 inches. So we are purposely having the level of the floor above the ground, and that's actually appropriate. We usually want the floor level to be a little bit above the ground and have a little bit of separation in there so water is not just kind of coming into the building. So we like our floor level to be a little bit higher than the ground level. What we'll often do is wherever there's a door coming out of the building, for example, I'll put a door over here. At that point, we'll want to actually put something called a landing out there. We need some little pad that you can step out on. That's just sort of a code requirement. You aren't allowed just to step out on dirt. So what you'll do is you'll put some sort of pad in here. And that's typically, I'll model that as a separate floor. Because what you want is actually to have a little bit of distance in here. If the door swings out, you can have most 1 inch difference in there because we don't want you sort of tripping out the panel at the door. It can be 2 or 3 inches. It can be up to like 8 inches. Okay, so you want a little bit of distance there. So if I want to put a little pad outside my door, I'll create another floor. And instead of being a wooden floor, this will be like some sort of concrete floor. And since I'm not going to hang this on walls, I'll just draw it. But in general, the rules are it has to be at least 3 feet deep. It has to be 3 feet wide so you have enough room to kind of really step out and not trip and fall. But it can be bigger than that if you want to. Okay, and that's a landing. Okay, so if you have a patio outside your structure, go ahead and put it in there. So far, it looks pretty good in terms of the sketch. But I'm also going to change its properties because right now, by default, it's also at 0. So it's at level 1, right at the same height. What I'll usually do is drop it down 1 inch or 2. And to do that, just give it a little height offset. Say -0.1, something like that. That'll just pop it down just a hair. So, let's find it in here. Let me pan this around. Just show you in here. If you have a big drawing and you want to sort of change the center point of which you're orbiting, you can use the center tool, and that'll actually shift the center to like whatever we've moved it to. Okay, so that's kind of what I have in mind. That door going through the brick, and a little bit of landing that's just a couple inches deeper. Don't worry, this is all sort of floating above the Earth. When the time the Earth is in here, it actually looks better in terms of what's going on. But it's just kind of floating in space right now. Okay, now the one variation I'm going to warn you about that may get you guys in trouble is if you're using curtain walls as part of your design, okay, you may sort of have a little bit of trouble closing the boundary. And let me just kind of show you what I mean. So again, I'll draw some sort of wall over here. Whatever it is. I'll go through and choose one of those, and oh, I want this to be a curtain wall instead, and maybe even that one over there to be a curtain wall. So I say, great, I'm going to put a floor on this thing. And when I go through and put a floor, and I say I want to choose those walls, it does pretty good on these walls. It always understands those walls. Curtain walls sometimes need a little bit of help. Okay. That's putting the floor like right at the center of the curtain wall. In this case, it did a pretty good job of joining that. That wasn't too bad. Every once in a while, when you're doing curtain walls, though, it doesn't give you a clean join. So if you're having trouble, just be aware of that if it's not joining up. And sometimes you get these funny little gaps like that just didn't quite get the curtain wall. It's usually where you have that kind of join right in there. When you say finish it, it says it must be in a clean loop. You say, okay, continue, and I'll go through and clean that up. The truth is, though, and let me give you another kind of clue about curtain walls. Yeah, this is actually not a great joint in that, you know, we don't really typically have a joint that looks like that. Whenever you have a curtain wall and it's trying to miter, it's trying to come to a kind of a clean corner with a solid wall, we don't tend to do it like this. What will happen is we'll actually have a little wraparound where the solid wall comes around even ever so much. Because yeah, if you think about doing this at a 45, it won't resolve nicely in terms of what's going on in there. So really a much more common condition, just the way it'll really get built, and that's why it sort of works better with the modeling too, is we'll go through and do something like this. If we have that kind of coming ever so close, but that's kind of an ugly corner, we'll break it and then change that to also be the solid wall type. Actually, what was that? Was on CMU. Okay, and then I can bring that back again. Okay, that's actually a truer corner condition, is that we tend to have curtain walls butting into things. They don't like to kind of hang out there. They do miter with themselves pretty nicely, but they don't miter with solid walls very well. Again, you know, it'll only hit you if you sort of have these funny corner conditions, but that's what's sort of going on. Ultimately, we'll learn to model those a little bit carefully. Okay, now you can go through and do that. Actually, even if you do this and you're creating the floor, let's say floor. I'll do the walls. So I'm going to go floor, 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 wall. Get that one. Here's kind of an interesting one. I could go ahead and choose that wall and choose that wall and hope that actually kind of makes a pretty good connection. It looks like, ooh, it came ever so close, but can you see that? Well, it did do a good job of joining that. I'm surprised it actually did that. Okay. The truth is, your floor probably won't have that little half inch of a notch in it. It's really just the difference between the center line of the curtain wall and the center line of that. So when you're defining floors, if you have sort of a multi-segment over here, okay, it is okay and probably preferable to go ahead and just choose one of the segments, like that little piece over here, and then just grab that and trim it. to that piece over there. Am I getting it? I'm not quite getting it. Let's see what's going on here. It looks like it's here. You look like you're here. I'm trying to figure out why it's not trimming. Again, trim tool. There we go. I'm trimming it up there. So what's the point here? If you have something made of a bunch of little kind of teeny tiny segments that are essentially in line with each other, just choose one of them and trim them, because it's really actually better to have a single line defining the edge of the floor as opposed to like 16 different little segments. Okay, so keep it as simple as you can when you're drawing the boundaries. Okay, so hopefully floors make pretty good sense. Most people get floors pretty easily. The biggest difference with floors is really just, if you get the boundary right, the floors tend to work out pretty well for you. So what I'll shift to is roofs, because that's actually where it gets more interesting, because that's where you have some options, and this is probably where you're going to have some design creativity going on and struggle a little bit in terms of trying to get it to work. So let me kind of show you how that works. Okay, roofs is very much like floors. We do them by drawing boundaries, but we do need to go through and specify two additional things: an overhang and where things are going to slope. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a simple roof on this building over here. As you place the roof, I don't really want to place it on level 1. I actually like to get it at level 2, so it's 10 feet higher and actually an appropriate level. If you put it at level 1, no worries, we can move it later. I'm going to switch to level 2. You'll see my building still over here. In fact, this building I think has these giant 20-foot walls probably. Yeah, they're unconnected 20 feet. We don't want that. I just want it to go up to level 2. That'll be a little bit better. So I got these walls on the first floor. I am ready to go ahead and start drawing my roof. So as I draw my roof, I say roof, and there's a lot of different options, because I could do my footprint, which sort of pulls up from the plan. I can do extrusions, which are good for like barrel vaults and kind of long linear systems that aren't really defined by flat planes. You have a lot of different ways we can go, but I'm going to go by footprint as a starting point. And I'll do that same thing. It's going to look very much like we're going to go through and create a floor. I give it a little bit of overhang. I'll say 2 feet as a starting point, but we can change that. There's this notion, should it extend into the wall core? What's going on there is really, this is just the notion of on the overhang. As the roof is hanging out there, boy, these pens are bad. You're measuring an overhang. So the question is, should I measure it from the face or should I measure it from the core? That's all it's really affecting. By core is usually a better choice, because that's the way we would actually measure it if you were doing it out in the field. Okay. I'm going to again choose this wall tool. And when I hover over the walls, it'll sort of indicate which side the overhang will be on. So again, I'm trying to create a boundary. I'll do it on that one. This is again one of those funny choices. I could do it on this wall or I can do it on that wall. Choose one or the other. You don't have to choose them both. So I'll choose it on the solid wall. And then what I might need to do is trim the boundary to finish it up. Oops. Looks like even here, see how the boundary got a little bit messy down in here? I didn't do a great job on that one, so I'm going to trim that corner too to make it a nice clean boundary. And I'll hit the finish, and hopefully it'll generate a floor, or roof, excuse me. It's over here, let's take a look at it. Okay, this is what's known as a hip roof. It's sort of sloping up from all the different sides, very common in prairie architecture. A lot of ranch houses have this kind of roof. Sort of comes up from all different sides, kind of like a big pyramid. It's actually a very efficient structural form. If you don't want a hip roof, because architecturally that's not the style you're going after, we can go through and change it and really adjust which sides slope and which sides come up straight. If we don't have a wall sloping, what you have is a wall coming straight up to meet the roof. That's called a gable end wall. And any of the walls, we can do that too. For example, if I want on this end of the house that to be a gable end as opposed to a hip, what I can do is choose the roof and edit the footprint. This will give me the boundary. And you'll see there's all these little guys over here, these little slope markers of a different size. And any one of those edges I can choose and just turn that off. So for example, if I want to not have this side slope, what I can do is just turn off the sloping. And then when I finish, okay, it just gives that little gable end instead. Okay, similarly, over here, if I don't want that one to slope, I can choose that, just turn off the slope. Okay, and that one will come up. So this just turning on and off the slope, it actually gets you an amazing amount of variety in different types of roofs. I can create these little gable roofs by turning off different sections of it and just having it kind of become a straight wall there. You might notice that when I turned off the slope, I sort of have this hole in the end of my building. Okay, so birds, bats, it's not a great situation. And looking at that, you're thinking, oh, earlier you told us about that wall profile thing. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and change the wall profile and stretch it up. And you actually could do that, but there's really even an easier way, because this is actually a really common condition. Okay. A really common condition that we'd like to be able to put a constraint in is that the tops of walls like to go ahead and be attached to roofs. It's a very common thing. So if we'd like that to happen, what we do is we can choose any wall, for example, this wall, and in addition to the editing the profile, you'll actually find a choice called attaching the top or base. And this is actually the shortcut. If you go through and choose a wall and say attach its top, you can say, what do I want to attach it to? And you can attach it to the roof. And the good news then is it'll just go pop it right up and follow it for you. So I can say attach, choose that roof, and it fills in the gap.
If you want to do a flat roof, do you just select no slope for the entire
Yes.
problem line?
Yes. I'm going to do this one too. Let me kind of clean this up. I got this wall. I actually got two walls here, so I'm going to grab them both. I'm going to attach. It's right there. Does a pretty good job. It'll take care of the glass wall and the curtain wall, doing whatever the pattern is there. So again, a good use of the patterns is that it'll sort of replicate it. Okay. Yeah, we can just really go through and make any sorts of variations you want. So the one you ask about, a completely flat roof, let's take a look at that. Completely flat would just be turning off all around. Okay, it's going to get rid of some mullions that it doesn't need. That kind of looks like a Usonian house. Ah, very good question. Let me start with a simpler roof, which is just a shed roof. Oh, actually, let me go back over here in terms of changing the slopes. Or I'll just do this. If I want it to be like a shed roof, that's just sloping from a single side. Okay, I'll choose that. I'll make one side sloping. Okay. Now in this case, notice the wall stretch. That was actually pretty good. It did that. If that's a little steep, actually the shed roofs, probably 3 or 4 in 12 is really close to what we have in mind. And really what that designation is, if you aren't familiar with it, we often express roof slopes here in terms of for every 12 inches of run, how much rise. So it's, as opposed to expressing it as degrees, you could put degrees in there, but it's a common way we talk about it. It's like 3 in 12 or 4 in 12. So let me apply that. That's just a much flatter roof. That's probably closer to what you have in mind. So again, I can attach that. Okay. Now Mr. Butterfly roof over there. I'm going to show you 2 variations. There's one that I'll call a clear stereo roof and one that I'll call a butterfly roof. And the key to both of those is actually, you may actually have to define 2 different roof planes. One that slopes this way and one that slopes that way. Okay, so let me do the butterfly in this one, then I'll show you a clear story one that will give you, it's actually loaded out there in coursework that'll help you out. So for example, let me do the butterfly. The butterfly looks something like this. If I want one roof plane going this way and the other roof plane going the other way, I got sort of a single sketch here. I'm going to do some trimming here to kind of clean this up. I'm going to basically trim this line to that line. Oops, I did the wrong thing. Actually, what I really want to do is trim this side over here to that, so I'm keeping that part. I'm going to trim this to here, and then I'll get rid of these extras. What I'm doing is on one part of the roof, I'm getting it to slope up from the left. Okay. Now, to get the butterfly that you talk about, what I'm going to do is do it the other direction. I'm going to go roof. And again, I'll choose walls. Choose that wall, this wall, that wall, and that wall. I'll do some trimming. Okay. And if I want it to slope in the opposite direction, I'll turn off this one. I'll turn off that one. I'll turn off that one. Oops. Make that a little less slopey. Okay. And that's closer to a butterfly. What's happening there is, it's harder to kind of see it there because the way the roofs are sloped. My geometry is not really good for how the butterfly is working. But don't be afraid. Every once in a while you have to do 2 different ones. And I'll warn you as you do this, sometimes the intersection between those roofs is a little bit complicated. Okay, so I won't talk about it in class right now because I could spend a whole 20 minutes talking about that specific issue. But you're going to start by just kind of creating these separate little roofs. Now, for your assignment, let me comment on this. Yeah, you want to go ahead and express your design creativity and stuff like that, but you don't have to create a really complicated roof. If you want for this first assignment and the 4 or 5 hours you want to put into it to sort of be a relatively flat roof, go for it. We'll get to the point where you can really express your design creativity. Don't kill yourself on the first one. What is it? Don't make your life too hard on yourself. Okay, not to discourage your design creativity, but again, some of these conditions actually take a fair amount of detailed modeling to get them to look 100% right. So even if you have an idea of a butterfly roof and it doesn't quite join there, for the first assignment, it'll probably slide through in terms of the big thing is just getting the idea of getting the main thing out there. So here's an idea of like a sort of, this was like sort of a butterfly roof. Let me show you one that we actually put out there on the server for you so that you can take a look at that is actually similar to what a lot of people may try to do in terms of what they call a clear story roof. So in this scenario, we have really 2 roofs again. One that's coming off this side, one that's coming off that side. And if you want to have a little row of windows between the 2 different roofs, what you actually need to do is make a little wall in there, okay, on top of one roof and below the other roof that you can place the windows in. So again, that's sort of a common condition. It takes a little fair amount of modeling to do that. And there's an example out there for you. Maybe I can even do a little video tutorial in terms of doing that. But the idea is there's one roof over here, and if you edit it, you'll see that it's defined off of this side, off the left side, with a slope going that way. Over here on the other side, there's a footprint over there. It's defined on that. How we actually get the second roof to jump up a little bit higher is we give it an offset. I raised it 4 feet. That way it would miss the other roof and give you the room to create clear story windows. So it may take a little experimentation. Of all the things you'll probably spend time and struggle with on the assignment, your roof is probably one of the hardest ones. So don't make your roof too complicated because you can really spend a lot of time just kind of dealing with that. But hopefully we'll be able to guide you through any individual problems you're having. Everyone's a little bit different. Okay, let me go ahead and offer there. Well, let me give you 3 more minutes of something just to kind of help you in terms of that scheduling, because I want to give you one little thing going there, but then we'll let you get out of here because I know it's time to get out. Okay, scheduling. Scheduling actually works out to be a pretty easy thing. Schedules are really just another type of view, and you can kind of create schedules by going to this thing it calls schedule of quantities. In fact, I think there might even be, or is there in your project, is there already a door and window schedule set up for you? I'm trying to remember. I think there may be. Let me go on back to session 3 where we had that thing stashed away. Yeah, there actually is a door and window schedule in there. So let me go ahead and put a real simple building in there. Let me just show you. We'll put some windows in there. Put some other windows in there. Okay. Again, don't hate me for my architectural design. It's just sort of a really ugly building, but it'll prove a point. The window schedule. If you open the window schedule, you'll see that it has a schedule already set up that's telling you basically there's some windows that are 1'4" by 2 by 6. They're fixed with trim. If we scroll on over, you'll actually see, well, I can't actually see the next thing I want to show you. There's some other windows that are 2 by 2. Okay. This has a lot of information about the windows already, and we're going to sort of add a little more information to it to make it a little more meaningful to you. So the window schedule is set up this way. One thing the window schedule is not doing a good job is actually telling me how many of each of those different windows there are. It's just sort of giving me the sizes of the different windows so I could identify them. But I would kind of like to actually get some field in there that shows me the count. And it actually doesn't show it to me right now. So what I can do is just add in the count field. For example, I can go to Fields, and you'll actually find that count is one of the variables in there. If I say add it in there and say OK, it'll actually put in another column that'll give me the count. There's 2 of this window, there's 4 of that window. So we can add more data to this thing as we want to. So you can add new fields in that it has available to you. But what I ask you for anyone who's taken it for 4 years to do is actually come up with a little formula to compute the area of the windows. And how that would work is as follows. I got a width and I got a height there. That's feeling pretty good. You sort of know that if you take window area or width by height, we can compute the area. So what that might look like is I would add another field. If you go scrolling on down here, you'll see that there isn't an area field. So it's an example of one of these things where you may want to add your own formula to it to find that. And here's how you do it. Of all the different things available, one is this notion of a calculated value. And if you calculate a value, you can say window area. It's going to be a formula. What's it going to be? It's not really going to be a number. If I take a unit of length and multiply it by unit of length, it's going to be an area. So it's just trying to figure out if it's going to be square inches or linear inches. I'm going to say it's the area as the unit of length. And then we want a formula. So the formula, these are some of the variables I have available to work with. But if I want to, I can just type in there height times width. And it's kind of like Excel. Say OK. When we choose it, it'll actually show us the areas. Okay, so you can define formulas. That's all we're really asking for the assignment is if you're doing it, go through and take that height by that width and multiply it together and do yourself the window area. Now, just as a matter of accuracy, most people will ultimately recognize that the window area, it really isn't strictly the height by the width. You might want to subtract off a couple inches here and there to allow room for the window framing. Okay, and if you want to get your formula a little more accurate, no worries. I can say height, if there was maybe 4 inches on the top and bottom, times width minus 4 inches. That would just give us a little more accuracy in terms of what's going on. So it's a little bit less. As a final thing, if you would like a subtotal to have here on this, what we need to do is actually just sort of put a subtotal down here. The way that works is in the tables, if you say sorting and grouping, that sort of gets to the idea of will it be grouped and have subtotal lines. I'll choose that I want to put a grand total down at the bottom. Okay. It doesn't actually put a grand total there because what I finally have to do is just tell it which of the different fields want to be totaled. And I'll choose the window area and say calculate a total for the window area. Okay, and then so there's 22 square feet in here. Okay, so where I did with that was in the table I went to sorting and grouping. And I said grand totals here. And then after that, I had to go to the appearance, or formatting, excuse me, and choose the area that I wanted to go through and do that total on. And again, I know that went by really, really fast. I just wanted to show it to you real quickly. But, you know, when you're trying to remember this and you can't remember how to, go to either BIMtopia or BIM Curriculum. And there's actually a really good little kind of 4-minute video right over here that'll show you how to do that in a little more detail. Okay, so that's what I want to leave you with. I apologize for running a little long today. Hopefully that was valuable in terms of getting things done. We're just going to roll into office hours. So if you want to stick around and ask some questions, the TAs are here. We'll be here for a little bit answering some questions too. But let's go ahead and adjourn this class and roll into the next phase.